Grounded versus Smallland, the battle for the ages of the mini survival. Maybe not. I've seen a lot of conjecture and talk about what kind of differences both games will have and what are the similarities, and so many people are convinced that Smallland is just another clone. So I want to set the record straight today. We're actually going to talk about the 10 major differences between the two games. While both games will be fantastic, obviously Grounded is much more advanced. It's coming up to its full 1.0 release later on this year, and it looks like Smallland will maybe just about be hitting early access at some point this year. So two very different stages, and maybe a bit early to really compare, but absolutely I've seen a lot of comments flying around. So let's dive into what really separates these games and why both can be great. Story and backgrounds. Grounded is based on you and possibly 3 of your friends being shrunken down by a mad scientist. You are then smaller than 1 centimeter high or around that, and you're going to be fighting off against spiders, ants in a giant backyard. With some elements of the story being implemented but the full story coming at 1.0, we know that we are kind of tracing the footsteps of that mad scientist, his previous experiments, and possibly a way to get ourselves big again. Set in the late 80s, early 90s, it is filled with pop culture references, that sci-fi feel, and obviously heavily based on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids kind of idea. Smallland is a much more epic fantasy feel to it. You are a kind of creature that has emerged from the underground. You was in there a long time because the overground was too dangerous, but now for some reason the humans are gone. You can start to explore and maybe reclaim some of that land. You're bigger than the grounded counterparts, in fact much bigger, so much so that you will be able to ride bigger creatures like rats, frogs and birds. You pretty much start off as a pathfinder. Your job is to secure the area, make sure that there's no dangerous threats, find your fellow travellers and explorers, and hopefully progress and make safe somewhere for you and your race to live above ground. It's a little more realistic, it's got that fantasy vibe, and it feels a bit more like the Burrowers to me. We know it's still set in modern times because we've seen clips from the trailers that show humans are indeed probably extinct or have been gone a while. Some sort of catastrophe has happened, and that's left the Smallland folk to be able to go and explore a world filled with human elements, but very much nature taking back some of her earth. Number 2, of course, is the art style. Grounded is very cartoony, it's very pop in your face. While some of the bugs can look pretty scary, they all have a kind of good sense of humour about them. Even the scary spider ones, they tend to have a bit more, I would say, exaggerated features at times, with some fantastic animations that really make Grounded look like a fun-filled game to play. The character models themselves are pretty cartoony, not on the kind of side of anime, but certainly maybe like Pixar. Only marginally bigger than an ant, everything takes on a bit of a different perspective compared to what you get in Smallland. Smallland is definitely a little bit more traditional. As I said, the realism in a lot of the bugs is there. They don't seem to have as much of that kind of over-the-top animations. While both worlds are vast and massive, Smallland definitely has a more of a viewpoint of being in the forest as well, obviously, and that means that you've got more elements of nature being there present, rather than Grounded's art style obviously being based on a backyard filled with the stuff that you'd come to expect. Number 3 is that size of characters, which are mentioned quite a bit. Because you are so small in Grounded, you're kind of limited in what you can do. The dev has spoken at length at times, talking about how difficult it was to resize certain stuff or kind of find a way that you'd be gathering resources. Even sticks would be too large for you to gather. Simple things like that, they had to find ways that you could use or replace certain basics of survival games you've come to expect. Even something pretty small like a toothpick and maybe a bottle cap as a shield and sword was simply too big for their characters. While this does limit things a little bit in terms of what you can really add, it does still mean that you are approaching the game with something very fresh and different. It means the perspective in Grounded is very much looking around you and seeing just jungles and trees and forests with the blades of grass acting as that, and it really makes and gives that sense of perspective that you really are that small. It looks like the characters in Smallland are probably about 3 times as big as the characters in Grounded, so the perspective is definitely much bigger. It's going to be more traditional ways of playing survival games, where you will probably be able to harvest logs and sticks and be able to use the components and the resources that you gather without it being too big. The world is massive, as well as obviously the foliage littering all through the forest, but it doesn't feel as dense as Grounded because you're simply just not that small. And that leads on to number 4. Taming and the ability to ride creatures. In Grounded you have pets, you can have a weevil or an aphid, and they don't really do much other than giving you some buffs. And while we're still waiting for some mechanics to be added in, I think it's pretty clear now that we're not maybe going to see us riding ladybugs or spiders at this stage anyway. There hasn't been any kind of info leaked, gone through the files, or any kind of hints from the team that riding bugs would be something they'd be implementing wholesale, with only pets maybe getting a bit of a buff before its full 1.0 release. And then you've got Smalland, which obviously does rely on you riding a whole host of creatures. You'll be able to ride a dragonfly, you'll be able to jump and go massively far on creatures like a grasshopper, possibly even frogs, rats and more. In that respect, Smalland is very much more like Ark or Conan, where you can go ahead and tame creatures with special foods possibly, and then being able to ride them. We're not sure on where they're going to be taking it. Are they going to be going down the route where you'd be having absolute hundreds of creatures around your base like Ark, or more along the lines of having just a select few that you'll be able to grab at any one time out in the wild just to use for that occasion? We do know that lots of the bugs and creatures will fight alongside you, but they can obviously get the risk of being killed, and certain creatures won't necessarily have the courage to fight bigger predators. Lots of this info has been revealed in dev blogs and interviews with the devs. I'd always wanted bug riding to be a thing in Grounded, but maybe not every bug, just a few as a mount, but it does seem like the game doesn't really need it anymore, with other ways to traverse the environment and the focus on combat and making sure you've got better weapons and armour. It seems like Grounded doesn't want to rely on that kind of animal Pokemon style kind of collection game. Another core feature is the seasons and weather. At the moment it's something that's been put on the like to do on Grounded. They've said that maybe weather or events would be something they'd like to add, but they haven't really gone through that stages of adding any features. Smalland is very focused on the weather and seasons. You will have changes as you play throughout the day and night, and there will be proper seasons that will affect the gameplay. Certain creatures may not appear in the same places during winter or autumn or spring, and you might not find enough of the resources that you want in certain different ways when the seasons hit. A scarcity of resources in winter and maybe an abundance of items in summer means that you might be storing up resources or going on harvesting kind of deals during the best months and then recuperating and maybe exploring in the winter months. Neither game is going to be implementing any kind of big major water differences though. Originally Smalland had in its prototype phase an idea that big raindrops could cause flooding in certain areas. But that idea has been abandoned and it looks like the rain is just going to be a more visual effect. And likewise in Grounded we do have some great water mechanics with the dewdrops that appear, but it doesn't seem like weather's going to be a big focus for them, although they are maybe adding more events to the yard, stuff that can happen or change, like the haze environment being turned off, giving access to an area that was previously toxic. Obviously Smalland and Grounded do share a lot of the same bugs, ants, and even the sub differences. So you've got red ants, black ants and brown ants, and it seems like Smalland is going to have a lot of them varieties, so maybe even more than the original Grounded. Grounded is letting nature do its course in giving you idea of factions. Red ants don't like black ants and they will fight each other, as well as obviously a lot of the other creatures basically taking each other on when they come across each other. That's going to be the same in Smalland, but Smalland is trying to flesh it out a little bit more with actual factions. You may need to side with one faction or another, complete missions for them to gain access to materials or equipment, or just get more through the story. Grounded has you surviving against all the creatures apart from maybe a couple pets that you'll be able to access, whereas Smalland is about being at one with certain creatures and possibly being on their side to help you progress. Grounded is going to be having a lot of base defense features. They've just announced that they're going to be implementing it in the next update and adding a whole host of new stuff. And this has kind of been on the cards for a while. I showed you guys leaked stuff like honey traps, catapults and more, but it's been put on the back burner for a while. So we know that there is going to be some sort of base defense mechanism in Grounded. It's already there that you have to protect your base basically from the ants stealing your food, and it looks like it's going to be expanded to more creatures that may want some other resources. As far as I'm aware, I've not heard or seen any of them types of mechanics going to be appearing in Smallland. You'll of course be fighting lots of insects and bugs and creatures, but it doesn't look like they'll necessarily be attacking you at any one stage at your base. That said, there's a bigger emphasis in Smallland on building a main base, maybe high up in the trees, and then having encampments and smaller bases that you can build out in the open. So there could be potential for some of that in the future. But as it stands right now, Grounded has base defense mechanics, traps and stuff, whereas Smallland is relying just purely on you exploring and coming across combat that way. Both games heavily into co-op. In Grounded it's 1 to 4 players, in Smallland we're predicting it's going to be more than that. Grounded at the moment has it that friends can join you on your world, or you can go and join your other friends, but they do kind of plan on dedicated servers maybe in the future. Smallland hasn't actually revealed how they're going to work it, but they have spoken up a big game about technology and trying something new. Both games will offer single player, but it does look like Smallland is possibly aiming for up to maybe 8 or 10 players, and it could even be bigger than that on more traditional kind of servers like Ark or Conan. It's still a little bit grey at the moment, so I don't want to go into it too much, but yeah, that's the kind of vibe I'm getting from the talks I've had and the info that I've seen. Of course, lots can change though in the development time, and as I said, Smallland is still a little bit away from release, so until then we just won't know. Grounded is a co-op game, but you can injure your friends, so there is light PvP elements, or maybe a little bit of just conflict between you and your friends. If you want it, you can have tournaments and little arenas, but it's not a major focus of the game, it's literally just friendly fire. Smallland seems to have plans for some bigger PvP component. They haven't officially revealed what it is, but the devs teased to me in interviews, and we've seen it in other places too, that there is going to be something, maybe like an arena mode built into the game, or maybe some sort of war element into it. Certainly on the Steam actual listings, it does list PvP content. I do believe the devs didn't say it would be PvP servers separated from the rest, because they didn't confirm 100% how the servers would work, but certainly it looks like there will be some sort of PvP element added to the game once early access has begun and it's well in development. And finishing off with number 10, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, their games are both at very different stages, and this does mean that we're going to see different types of gameplay showing off, different types of things happening. In the run up to 1.0, I think Grounded's going to be pretty secretive, other than this next update that adds a big huge amount of changes that they want to test out finally. But we know a lot of endgame content will be held back for the 1.0 release, and we do know that they plan to support the game after that, but you can expect lots of the updates to dry up. Whereas we're really only at the start of the journey. It's the most obvious difference with Smallland. It's made by a smaller team as well. They haven't got the financial power, even though they're a publisher that publishes a lot of games in the UK and physical editions. This is their first game. This feels like this is their first project. It may make or break them in terms of whether or not they do more like this in the future. Both have different ways of communicating, but both are fantastic at it. Grounded does actually communicate quite a lot with their weekly streams and their posts, and then you've got Smallland doing their dev blogs every single week on Steam, highlighting Q&As, creature features and much more. So again, the difference though is about what to expect. We're getting teasers from Smallland, we're getting kind of content from Grounded. And I think that's probably the most important thing to remember. You shouldn't judge Smallland too harshly. It may not be the most amazing game ever. I haven't really sunk any time into it, so I can't say for definite. But from the looks of it, it feels like it's got promise. And I think sometimes tubers especially, and us dedicated players, we do tend to judge things quite harshly. And I'm all for giving a small little indie company like Merge a chance with a game they rescued from pretty much never being made because the original developers couldn't take that project forward, and giving them hopefully some support in giving the game a go. And that's about it in the 10 major differences between both games. I could sit here all day and pick out pieces of gameplay that are very similar to other survival games. I know the Grounded devs love a lot of survival games. They particularly like The Forest and have included a whole bunch of stuff from that game in Grounded. But are people comparing Grounded to The Forest? Probably not, no. There's nothing wrong with some overlap. There's nothing wrong in having two survival games set in the same kind of format as you're a small creature. But they really do different things, and I really do think there's enough differences that for survival fans that are always looking for something fresh, you will get a brand new experience with Smallland. You may prefer one or the other, and that is okay, but what I'm tired of seeing is people kind of crap on either game, saying that it's bad or it's not going to be good, and even fans saying that Grounded's not for them, that's fine, have your opinion, but I would say wait until Smalland comes out, judge it fairly, and then you can really talk about which one's your favourite game to play, and that's okay. I'll be here no matter what to cover both games. The future, I love Grounded, I've devoted second channel, most of it to it in recent times, but when Smalland comes out I probably will roll with both of them for a good long while as well. I'll be there every step of the way. Until next time, I'll catch you lot later.